So, this is not my story, but my mom's. This encounter happened around 20 years ago, when I was just a little baby, and my mom was much younger and more vulnerable. After a small dinner party that my grandparents threw for the family, my mom started to head home. It was dark, and since my dad was busy working, my mom and I were alone in the car. My grandparents live out in the country, so most of the ride back to our house in the city is on long stretches of nearly abandoned country roads. As you may know, country roads don't often have streetlights or any other sort of lighting, and often there aren't many homes or businesses around. To my understanding, my mom had been driving for about 15 minutes. This meant that we were another 10 to 15 minutes from getting home, when she saw the red and blue police lights go off behind her. My mom, being a cautious mother, knew she wasn't speeding, so she was already wary of the officer. He gets out of his car and walks up to her window. "Ma'am, do you know why I pulled you over?" My mom, thinking that perhaps the officer saw that she had a tail light out or something similar, was still slightly trusting for the time being. "No, sir, I don't." "You were speeding." "No, sir, I wasn't. I was watching my speed carefully, and actually was going under the speed limit." "Oh, actually, I meant you were swerving." "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" "No, I have not, and I was not swerving." "Ma'am, you were. So you're going to have to step out of the vehicle so I can—" As the officer was telling my mom to get out of the car, he shined a flashlight on her. And that's when he saw me, a little baby, in the back seat, and cut his sentence short. Never mind, you're fine. Drive safe, ma'am." The officer rushed back to his car and my mom drove away as quickly as she could. The cop car turned around in the road and headed in the other direction. My mom got home as quickly as she could, realizing that the officer was either fake or corrupt, and had he not seen a baby in the back seat would have most likely taken advantage of her being alone. So, to the officer that almost hurt my mother, let's not meet. This event happened to me about 5 weeks before the end of my high school career. Exams were close by, as well as prom. I was 16, tall, 6'4", and I played for my high school rugby team. I wasn't in a relationship at the time, although I had a crush on a girl who we will call Hannah. Hannah was a beautiful, athletic 5'8" brunette, green-eyed girl. She wasn't in a relationship at the time as well. And to my understanding, she had a thing for me too. Due to my size, I was quite an intimidating figure. A lot of my rugby friends were smaller than me, and because of this, I never used to get bullied. I guess it was also because I gave my high school a good name by playing rugby. How this event started. Every time I would have rugby training, I would find a note in my locker that would have a different poem on it every time. It also had a strong smell of women's perfume. At first, I thought nothing of it. Just some secret admirer that was a little shy to say these things face to face. Initially I thought it was Hannah, because she had a thing for English literature at the time. I did eventually confront Hannah about this, and much to my surprise she told me she hadn't been writing these poems. I gotta admit, I was a bit disheartened at the time. The next thing I remember is that it was a Tuesday. This would turn out to be the worst week of my life. Tuesday morning came, and I was on my way to class, when that all too familiar smell of women's perfume hit me like a punch in the face. I turned around and began looking for the source of the aroma. I found it. It was a girl called Shannon. Shannon was an attractive 5'5", blonde hair, icy blue eyes girl. She was just staring at me. I stared back at her. Her icy blue eyes were hypnotizing. She smiled at me, and I smiled back. I noticed Shannon in a few of my classes, but thought nothing of it. Later that Tuesday, I was at home studying. My entire year group had an exam on Friday. I was studying for about 2 hours, when my mother called me down. She said someone was waiting for you outside the door. I naturally thought it would be one of my rugby mates. So I opened the door, and to my surprise, it was Shannon. She greeted me with a hello, and I in return said the same thing. She asked if she could come inside. I obliged and let her in. She said she wanted to talk, so I took her to my room. I let her in first and closed the door behind myself. As soon as I turned around, she jumped on me and began kissing me. We kissed for about 30 seconds before I came to my senses and pulled away. I said to her, "What was that for?" She replied with, "I love you." I was shocked, but I did tell her that I liked someone else, and I planned on asking her out. Shannon looked at me with a blank expression, then suddenly, that expression turned into rage. She slapped me really hard. Her right hand must have been stinging as equally as the left side of my face. She then screamed at me, "All those notes I gave you, and you don't feel the same way?" I replied with, "So it was you. You have been sending me notes all this time." She slapped me again. This one hurt more than the first one. She then sat in my bed and started crying. I was still stunned by the second slap. I sat next to her on the bed. I apologized to her and said that there are plenty of single guys in my rugby team who would be more than willing to date her. She looked at me and said, "I want you and you alone." I really had no idea what to do. The next thing I remember, Shannon mounted me and whispered in my ear, "I want you to be my first." I lifted her off of me, and we were both standing. I said to her, "I can't do that." She said, "If you don't have sex with me right now, I'm going to tell everyone in school that you raped me." At this point, I called her bluff, but she insisted that she was going to do just that. I escorted her out of my house. Not before she kissed me again. We kissed for about 30 seconds, made out if you will. Then she slipped her phone number into my hand before taking off. The next day is when the shit hit the fan. As soon as I entered school, I was told to go and see the principal. I went to her office and knocked on the door. She called for me to come in. I entered her office and sat down in the chair opposite her. She explained to me that there had been an anonymous complaint filed against me involving sexual assault. I immediately have an idea who reported this. She says that I am suspended until further notice. I'm sent home after spending 1 hour in school. I walk home and see both my parents' cars outside the house. I enter my house and my parents are sitting at the dinner table. They ask me to sit down, and I do. My dad asks me if these allegations are true. I immediately tell him no. He just looks at me with a blank expression. I go to my room and a couple of my rugby friends visit me and talk about the situation. After they leave, the police arrive. I'm taken away in handcuffs just outside my door. I don't struggle because I'm innocent, and I'm put in the back of a police vehicle and driven to the station. The officers escort me to an interrogation room, and I'm handcuffed to the table. I'm waiting there for about 10 minutes when a detective comes into the room and uncuffs me. I begin to gain the feeling back in my hands. The detective asks me, "Do you know why you're here?" I have an idea. The detective was a female. She was around 5'10", dark brown hair, and she wore glasses. She was looking through paperwork, where she looked back at me and asked if I had heard of a girl named Shannon. I said yes, and she wrote that down. She then said to me that Shannon has not been seen since she left your house. I asked the detective who reported the supposed rape. She immediately replies, "Well, I'll ask the questions here." I shut my mouth and listened to the silence in the room. She then stands up and knocks on the door. An officer opens it, and she walks out. About 10 minutes later, she walks back in and tells me that I am able to go. My parents are waiting in the designated area. They are extremely happy to see me. They both hug me. The detective tells me that we may have more questions for you later in the week. As I'm being drove home by my parents, I remember that Shannon had given me her number. Maybe this was a different number to the one her parents and the police had tried to use to get in contact with her. We arrive home. I immediately run upstairs into my room and scout the place for that note. I find it after 5 minutes of searching. Pulled out my phone, put the digits in and hit call. It was a dial tone for about 10 seconds, then it stopped and a voice on the other end said, "What took you so long?" I replied with, "I think you know what took me so long." The voice on the other end said that they wanted to meet. I didn't know for sure that it was Shannon. All I knew was that this voice was going to give me some answers, so I agreed to meet. The voice said to meet at a local park. I knew the place. It was about a mile up the road. I said, "I'm on my way now." They replied with, "I'm already there." I ran to the park. My rugby training didn't let me down. I reached the park, and it was empty. And add to this, it was late, around 12 a.m. I rang the number once again, and I heard a ringtone come from behind one of the trees. Shannon stepped out from behind the tree and walked up to me and kissed me. I wanted answers, so I immediately asked her why the fuck she did what she did. She replied with, "People do crazy things when they're in love." I was annoyed, but I was tired from being at the police station. Shannon then pulled out her phone and texted someone. About 10 seconds after she did this, 2 men came from behind her. They were huge men, either the same height as me, if not taller. I shouted the 2 men to get me and they sprinted towards me. I did what anyone would do and fucking ran for my life. I was glad that I did rugby, and that I wasn't a fat piece of shit that couldn't run to save his life. I managed to outrun the 2 men and made it home in one piece. I called the detective and told them the whole story, and I've given them the number Shannon gave me. A few days later, the police came to my house. They informed me that Shannon was mentally ill and that she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. As for the 2 men, I haven't seen them. Next week came by and I was allowed back to school. People didn't look at me the same way anymore. Hannah ignored me for 2 weeks before I got up the courage to ask her to prom. Much to my surprise, she agreed. However, I can never forget what Shannon put me through. Shannon ruined my life. I was almost convicted of a crime I did not commit, and I could have been thrown in jail. Shannon, you are truly one crazy bitch. Let's never meet again. Okay. This story still creeps me out, but I am happy to share it with you. I like to go for walks in the dark. I am not sure if this is strange or if everybody does it, but it just makes everything really creepy. Now for some information. I live in a well-civilized area, with a lot of friends who live extremely close to me. Around 2 kilometers from my house is a heavily wooded area, and I like to follow a 4-wheel drive track when I go for my walks. Okay, time for the story. It was around 9:30 p.m. on a Friday night, and I was going for a walk down the 4-wheel drive track when I heard a very light scream in the distance. I assumed it was just some kids playing, so I kept walking, until I heard it again. At this point, I knew someone was in trouble. I ran for my life, hoping that I could help this person. I ran for about 100 meters when I came to the end of the track and looked around. One of the first things I saw was a girl, about 19 years old, being held by a 40-year-old looking man. When the man saw me, he dropped the girl and legged it around the corner. I sprinted over to the woman who was busy crying, obviously shaken up. Anyway, to cut to the chase, we ended up calling the police, and they came back and took my statement and brought the girl home. I'm glad that I still go for my walks. If I didn't, a girl would probably not be here today. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, then please like, subscribe, and comment. Or if you didn't like the video, then of course feel free to dislike it. If you want, that is what it's there for. Anyway, that's all from me for now. I'm hoping to get the next video up, hopefully by next week. Let's say Monday, but that's really going to depend on when I can get permission to do stories. Thankfully, some people have been really kind. Also, right now I'm working on something a little bit special. It's a profile of the Cecil Hotel. Now, I'm sure you're American Horror Story fans, so we'll be familiar with that, and you'll know that that's actually the basis for the hotel in the show right now. doing a bit of research and deciding what I want to use and what I can use on that video. And hopefully I'll have that up in let's say a week or so once I write out the script for it. Well, that's it for now. Take care.